This is pretty much the most important slide that I'm going to share with you. And this is my process. How do I find the best people to follow on Twitter? And these are my kind of key bullet points that I've spent many years kind of refining. And so I'm going to share them with you, and hopefully you can learn to develop this into a really powerful tool for yourself. So, 1, explore your community. Now, what I mean by this is when I follow someone on Twitter, let's say there's a guy called James Smith. He's one of the developed FX market strategists at a European bank. I think his work is very good. I really like his analysis. I think he's right on point. So what I will do is I will find him on Twitter and I will follow him. That's great. That's step 1. Step 2 then is, if he works at a big financial institution, he is very much on point, he's got his finger on the pulse, and he provides timely and useful information for me. My question then is, when I go on his Twitter account, who does he follow? Who does he feel is good enough to make his short list of the people he would want to follow? And then I start unlocking this kind of spider's web of who's connected to who, and then people who I'd never even heard of start blipping up on the radar, and I start looking at the context of their tweets, and they're tweeting useful information all of the time. So who's connected to who in your network is a real important one. It's kind of the number 1 step that I would take. The other thing then is, you're obviously going to start following quite a few people, so you've got to get organized. Now I'm going to share with you a free service called TweetDeck, which allows you to organize them by columns into structures in different lists. So basically you can categorize who you're following to make it much more orderly, so you can look at it and utilize it more effectively. So creating lists is quite key. A common question I get is, how many Twitter accounts can you follow in, say, one list? I would say maximum you want to do is about 450, 500. I think if you go beyond that, then TweetDeck, which streams these tweets in real time, gets too fast. And so that's about optimum. I'd say if you're more experienced and you can manage looking at more things, then perhaps you can go a little higher. But then I think it's about then breaking it up into more subject areas. Rather than having one list with everything, that's quite hard to manage. So how we used to do it was that each column had a specific purpose. One might be the transportation hubs within central London to identify if there are any terror alerts or suspect packages and so on. Another might be people explicitly commenting on US stocks. Another one might be someone talking specifically about FTSE companies. So these are all how you would organize it. Understand what type of news you are looking for. One thing, again, to be crystal clear, you're not using Twitter to capture, say, economic data when it's released. That's where you go to investing.com or Forex Factory. You can get that anywhere. What you're looking for are rumors. That's what's really powerful when it comes to Twitter. Now, with rumors, things like Brexit, again, would be a perfect one. When you know that there's a big meeting, or let's say the China-US trade war, there's a phase 1 meeting, a signing happening at X time, when do you think potential rumors might occur? Without surprise, they occur right in the build-up and run-up to the meeting. Not a week before, but a day before. Kind of the same thing can happen with central bank sources. So when Bloomberg release something like an ECB source comment, which is basically an informed person with close thinking of the central bank, they will drop that in, usually in the 48 hours before the event in itself. That's when the market is most susceptible to that type of information. So again, I know kind of just through experience when I need to look for Twitter and when rumors might occur. So say with economic data, yes, I'm not looking for the release, but if there was going to be a leak of data, for example, like ISM ADP, non-farm payrolls. If it is going to come, it's going to come just before. And so therefore, I'd have a search criteria set up so I could see then if there's any leaks and rumors before things come out. Chicago PMI being a case in point. Anyone who does trade will know Chicago PMI comes out to subscribers a few minutes before the official public release, and you can get it on Twitter way before the likes of Financial Newswires will be releasing it. Look at who writes articles. So again, I'm spending a bit of time going through these points because these are the key ones. Who writes these articles? I mean, I always say this to people. When you read the Wall Street Journal, for example, and you read a really interesting article, how often do you actually pay note to who wrote it? What's the person's name? And then cross-check it. Do they tweet? And lo and behold, they do, and fairly frequently, and of high quality information. So get in a habit of opening your mind to capturing, this information. People, used to pay me a lot of money in my previous job as clients for me to think like this. I'm constantly thinking of how can I get information and how can I get it as quickly as possible, and how can I be more informed, and how can I keep my clients more informed or the traders more informed. So every time you read something, ask yourself that question: who is writing this piece, and do they tweet? Are they worth following? Next is backtest and fact find. I used to do this religiously every month, and again, sounds like it's a lot of work, right? But don't forget, this is what my job was. And so again, I'm kind of giving you the trade secrets a little bit, but here what I would do is if it became well known that Twitter was the first port of call to break a piece of information, what I would do is I'd make a note of that, and at the end of the day I'd go onto the advanced search filters on Twitter and I would put in this exact kind of time frame of when the initial event happened. I'd then look back chronologically and identify who was the first person to break this information. And more often or not, it were people who perhaps I'd never even come across before. But then I would look at the context of their tweets, how often do they tweet, and I'd put everything together to then see whether or not there's someone worth adding into my list of people to follow. So it's not, nothing, and I say this with full belief, there's no such thing as luck. It's all in the preparation. You've got to put yourself in luck's way for it to materialize and for you to benefit from it. I spent a whole career doing that, working silly hours doing this type of thing because I had to be that edge for the traders. And so it all, a lot of this back testing and doing the hard yards pays dividend in the end. The other thing is continuously update and review the people you follow. People often, and I get this, I normally talk to traders when they're quite junior. They get quite excited about the prospects of what Twitter can bring. As you can tell by the things that I'm talking about, that your potential edge can be huge from a time perspective and execution point of view. But then they kind of add all these people and then they leave it. And that's not what I'm saying. It's an evolving thing. People are, there's new people coming into the market, adding value. There's people who are already there who are not tweeting enough, who are just cluttering your feed. Subject matter in the market is changing. Whether it's Turkey, whether it's inversion of the yield curve, whether it's the repo rate spike that we had in 2019. You want to be altering the feed to reflect the macro hierarchy of the subjects that are moving markets. So change constantly. Quality over quantity is what matters when it comes to this. And then this is another thing I always used to do, and maybe not everyone's actually aware of this, but news in its local language comes out way quicker than it does in English. Now, if you were looking at Chinese press and Russian press, I'm going to pick those two because of the trade war that's been going on most recently in 2019, 2020, and then also Russia-Ukraine. Remember the annexation of Crimea in 2014? What I used to do was, my first thought path was, what are all the major newspapers in Russia and Ukraine? Now that's an easy Google search. Once I go on there, then I then look at the actual websites in Russian, and what I used to see was when I put the Russian website and then its English version of the website, the Russian website was updating infinitely quicker. So it was almost like it would go up there and then get translated by an English speaking team to then go on the English version. And the same thing happens in China. So what I'm saying is, I used to just rely on translation tools and read literally news in its local language, and I used to find massive time edge to get into stories way before their markets would react in terms of US, UK and European markets. So on TweetDeck, one of the systems I'll show you shortly, there is a auto translation function where you can look at tweets. So I'd always recommend, if the subject matter is in a different language to English, then you should always follow it in its local language if you want to be quick and react to things in that manner. Now, with all this being said, it does sound like a lot of work, but this is how you can really take advantage and use Twitter if you're going to use it for trading purposes. The other way of doing this, of course, the shortcut, is to get a Squawk service like New Squawk, for example, and they have designated people doing this for you 24 hours a day. So hopefully that was insightful. I've had a lot of requests to do this video over the years, so hopefully it's going to be useful for you and you've enjoyed it, and it's opened your mind to a little bit of the way to view and approach using Twitter to trade and to monitor news. Any questions at all, please do feel free to leave a comment and I'll be happy to help further. Alright, I'll see you next time. Thanks very much, guys.